crappy background, or be my,
No,
should I lean so
no.
that I can have the tree in?
You should go like this or like this. Mhm. Um, like I do wonder about like what makes it so that, well, for example, right? I'm sure you know people that are maybe like not in despair, but struggling. And then also like I've never been busier. And I don't know if that's like contingent. I wonder about this, if it's contingent about what you do for work, or if it's contingent about like what you believe and who you are that makes that different for different people, you know? Do you think about stuff like that or no?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I've been both people at different times in life, right? So you relate it to your own experiences. I think that's the only way you can. But
Yeah.
um, and my husband is always quick to remind me about the pre-kid life that we had, and how simple things were. And then on days where I'm just overwhelmed, he'll be like, "This is what you wanted." Now we have a
Hmm.
family. Now we have kids. Now we have school commitments and more involved in our careers. And this is the dream that we all work towards, but it's a lot. A lot of
Yeah.
times you take on another thing, but you don't give anything up.
Hmm.
And I think so many people do that. But in today's world, it's not just about the tasks. I think the tasks are achievable for most. It's the mental capacity to, like, handle what you're hearing. So you hear these negative stories on the news, you hear, um, there's negativity all around in all of, like we just mentioned, in all of the social media that you see. There's just a lot of, focus on those stories that are sort of sad or heavy.
Hmm.
And I think that people have absorbed that, and it's starting to hit close to home, right? They have family, extended family, friends, colleagues that are going through trying times or have some type of personal impact that looks or feels a little bit like the news story they saw. So,
Hmm.
because it's so close to home, it weighs even heavier.
Yeah. I was thinking about, we had this great exchange in response to, well, in response to getting to know each other, frankly, but really in response to this idea of motivation.
Mhm.
And let me ask you sort of, what are you finding is driving you toward, even when you probably look ahead at your calendar every day and you're like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
How, and I think like that's one way to talk about motivation, but what we were sort of exploring was like sustaining motivation. So not having it necessarily come in fits and starts, but having it day over day, sort of like be the fuel that you run on. What does that look like for you? Like, what's your fuel? How are you staying, as just as a singular leader? And we'll talk about teams in a second. How are you staying motivated?
uh, well, for me, I'm driven to keep, I think it's all about that purpose, right? What is your purpose? And having that inner guide around what is my purpose each day. So whether that's, and for me, it's partially, my commitment to my family and being a great wife and mother, and, committing to my son's learning and growth, and even just our family and bonding with our nieces and nephews and all of that, right? And then also my other purpose is really caring and looking out for all of the people I work with. They're my extended family. They truly are. I care deeply about every one of them, and I want them to grow. I want them to feel supported. I want them to find success, whatever measure that is for them. And that means I have to be a good coach. I have to be a good leader. I have to show them my care and concern and my vulnerability, to be real with them and connect with them, and get them to understand my purpose is almost their purpose in many cases, right? So knowing those two things, you prioritize every day the weight that you carry on your shoulders on, is the weight enough to stop me or get in the way of me trying to achieve that purpose, right? And it has everything to do with emotional intelligence, right? It's something that is not granted to you at birth. It's a skill and something that you have to consciously think through, right? How much weight am I going to give this emotion at this point in time, knowing I'm on this journey? And if I give too much weight to this emotion, it could take me off course.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like, right, you've been working at developing this skill in the years you've been a leader.
Yeah.
Then, March happened, and, the EQ that you may have developed, I think leaders had a choice. It was like double down on our purpose, or kind of get lost. And we were saying, like, you've been stymied, you've gone through, difficult parts of this.
For sure.
How has the need to tend to the emotional experience you're having and the one in front of you with your team, how has it changed? What are you finding in terms of what it requires to get that fuel going,
Yeah, it requires more. I mean, no question about it. So one thing I think I've grown in tremendously this year, and I have a lot more work to do, of course, but is my vulnerability, and really, really understanding how I need to not only handle my emotions, but I need to share them, and ask about them more and have more dialogue about it. That's not my comfort zone. It's not my safe space. I'm really more about, let's talk about what are the commitments and get to the tasks and create our expectations and accountabilities. And certainly I do have personal dialogue with every one of my team members and build rapport, but just asking and talking about emotion is not, has not been probably part of my routine on a consistent basis as it is now something I am working to achieve, because that's that mental wellness is an important part of the motivation factor. And if they're not able to articulate their mental state, I could miss something important. And all the tasks and lists and expectations and accountabilities don't matter.
Yeah. Oh, amen. How do you do that? So I'm imagining you have one-on-ones, you have team meetings. How do you do a temperature check on where people are? Like, what does it actually sound like or look like when you do that?
It starts with that rapport piece, right? So, I'm thinking about a one-on-one type conversation. So you're always going to have that rapport conversation first before you really get into the nuts and bolts of what you're hoping. You have to, ask about how was your weekend, how's your family, and it's further. I'm taking it further with conversations before, and not just do high level, tell it, move on. It's taking it a couple questions deeper to really understand what's going on with their home life. I think that's a starting point, even when I'm out. So I have, two different views to interact with colleagues on. I have colleagues that I interact with that are they're in a virtual setting and we interact kind of like this. And then I have colleagues that are in a retail setting. They're essential colleagues, and they're frontline heroes in my mind, and many others that are, face to face with customers. And so even when I'm in a branch setting or in a retail setting, it's still starting that conversation with not like, asking them about their customer traffic, still going back and saying, tell me about your family. And I don't think you can underrate that at this point in time. You have to spend the time talking about them and their personal life and what's going on far more than I ever have.
Yeah. So when you, for sure, and I think that level of rigor, like I said, in some ways, I hope doesn't change after COVID is done, right? Like that ability to sort of care and connect is the fuel that is sustainable. And it sounds like you have a very intentional practice around it. Because I think the other mythology is like, well, it'll just work itself out. We have work to do, and that can wait. And that's kind of what brought us to, this conversation today. We were talking about, of course, we've talked about you individually and motivation. By the way, before I get into motivating teams, tell us how many, so you have these two ways you interact with the people that work under your purview. How many people is that, and how spread out is it? What does it look like for you to manage on a day-to-day basis?
So right now I have 7 direct reports. And those direct reports each have somewhere between 10 to 14 offices that they support. So in total, in my extended sort of reporting structure, I've got about 500 that I connect with. And so you can see how you're not interacting with that many of the, you only get a couple times that you're interacting one-on-one with those 500. My 7 every week, of course. But beyond that, you only get a couple times throughout the year that you're one-on-one interacting with them. And you cannot let that one-on-one conversation with that one colleague not be impactful, because you only have that short window, and you might not see them again or hear from them or be able to connect with them again for a while. So, if you skip past and you focus on, you could easily say, so how long have you been in your role, and how's the position? How are you doing connecting with your team? And you could have some good rapport building conversation about work. But I think if you don't start with them personally and then their family in today's world, and with the mental wellness that's going on, it shows maybe a lack of care for the reality of the environment we all live in today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine too, knowing you and having such an appreciation for you, there's a system to it, I would imagine, and sort of like how you organize, right? And no shade on that. That's what I think, because there's also Lisa, like you, the person that's taking on so much. And you mentioned like prioritizing, and I think being intentional, having it in your calendar, making sure. Sometimes with me lately, and let me know if this resonates for you, like I'm taking notes when I talk to people. So the next time I talk to them, I'm like, right? You're like, oh yeah, I've been doing that for decades. Of course.
That's just out of a pure awareness that I have a poor memory, but absolutely, system, process, structure is my survival, right? You have to have consistency. And I think that allows you to ensure that no conversation gets left behind, right? But I do think that part of today's environment requires you to build into your system process that already existed, right? Many of us already had one-on-ones with our colleagues. We already had, depending on what your leadership scope is, right? You already have sort of a structure for how often you meet, how often you connect, how often you build expectation conversations, right? But you have to intentionally add into that conversation and that structure some focus on positive recognition and connecting, and that's it. Where maybe you didn't have that before. But now I think you have to be more intentional about that connection piece. For example, I'm just trying to kind of think through, we've started a recognition week. So like every other week, just to make sure that we're really overemphasizing the positive recognition so that colleagues know we appreciate them. These are challenging times and challenging, experiences that we're all living through together. And so if you don't create the time to make the recognition, it's something you can always do more of, right? So if you don't create the time and you're not really intentional about it, somebody may lose that feeling, right? So we're creating, my team and I have created positive recognition weeks where we have a tracker. I mean, I'm all about system process, right? But we have a tracker, and I'm not inspecting the tracker for them. It's their own, doing and commitment, and I trust and empower the leaders that I lead, right? But everybody's kind of got their own tracker to say, hey, this week, and it's every other week, you need to find 10 new people to reach out to about something and give them some positive recognition and be intentional about connecting with them. And the nice thing about the tracker is that week over week and month over month, you can kind of see, am I connecting with different people, and what is that? But it's being intentional about it and not just saying, yeah, I do this. And it was actually 2 months ago and it felt like yesterday, right? It's ensuring that that action happens.
Yeah, you're reminding me. This is my habit tracker. Trackers are awesome, and I've never really used them, but it's like, it is really, you'll see some spots that I didn't do it. But the point is, and it's our favorite guy, James Clear, right? Atomic Habits. It's like over time. So this brings me to sort of this question that you and I are both grappling with. And by the way, lots of other leaders are grappling with that I'm talking to, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because I think you probably have some wisdom to share as much as you have questions.
Yeah.
Which is great. Like, let's stay in a state of questioning. But when it comes to teams, here's kind of what I'm hearing. I'm hearing from you today, like, the importance of honoring where we're at in a journey or a experience, that there was a before, there's during, there will be an after, and then it just kind of keeps going. And I think about with teams and keeping teams motivated, to really keep the individuals on a team connected to what you've already led with, which is like the purpose of what we're doing, how you fit into it, that we're there. If you extend the timeline, this is a moment in time, like we're going through it together, right? We will continue to work together. I mean, I'm thinking about, like, even just looking at it from, I know things are hard right now, this too shall pass. One of my favorite things to say. Being a strategy for motivating teams. What are you seeing? What questions do you have? What are you experiencing as it relates to motivating this large team that you run?
I think what I hear, and I have a team of really phenomenal leaders, and they lead leaders. So it's kind of unique in our line that, it's leaders leading leaders. And so they do have questions about how to lead through this all the way up through myself, right? I do too. But I think part of it, and the biggest thing I hear, is how do I balance that? So I know I need to have more, I need to be intentional with my positive recognition. I need to be intentional with my connection with the colleague and show my vulnerability and my empathy and talk through what's going on with their life. But I also need to then at some point go, okay, but I still have to also talk about the numbers and the results and the productivity, and I have to draw accountabilities. So how do I, and when is the right point to switch gears, and how do you balance that? And that's always a challenge. I don't think that's a new challenge, but certainly it's just more visible as the need to have that connection has grown a little bit more.
Well, and I'm wondering too about this tracking, how, again, I kind of come back to, like, this is a point in time. The goals haven't changed, right? So this was this other sort of thought that I had for you about, like, how to allow for the emotional experience, but also really sort of, have deference for, like, there's work to do. And it sounds like you're doing some experimenting with, like, how to weave that into meetings and interactions. But I'm wondering too about, like, strategies and tactics for driving toward the goals, but having maybe more flexibility in how you get there, more flexibility in how people work. And maybe having that be a strategy for like, look, we still have to meet this metric, but how we get there, we're going to give you a little bit more flexibility. I'm thinking about this with, especially parents who have school going on at home, and people who might be struggling a little bit. So that's one thought. The other is using this tracker. The other is just like creating a system for flagging when people need extra support, and decreasing the shame of like, I need a day off for mental health. And then really trusting people and giving them the autonomy to like take care of themselves,
Yes.
Those are some thoughts. What else?
Yeah, I mean, you've got me thinking. There are two different maybe views I have on that, because I do have, my direct reports are district managers that are not in day-to-day retail settings. So with that group, that is absolutely appropriate for me to kind of balance their sort of how you get their method and with what they need, right? And I can flex and they can flex, and we've done a lot of that. And we've said, I've said to my team, if you've got to get your kids, from a pod group, I've got one that's got a pod going on, right? Then you go get your kids, like do what you need to do. And I have to trust that they understand and respect their purpose in this role and within our organization to come back and do what they need to do to get the job done. And I have a phenomenal team, and I do, and I, certainly empower them to do that. And they do a wonderful job. And the other phase of it is the team that isn't in a virtual setting. They're in a, a true retail setting that has retail hours and has a commitment to the public. And that looks and feels a little different, right?
Yeah.
Now, I will say, I mean, I work for a phenomenal organization. Huntington Bank is just truly committed to caring about their colleagues. So I've been with them for 18 years, not by accident, but by choice, because I couldn't be more proud to work for a company that cares about their colleagues. And they have done everything they possibly can to flex to the needs of what's going on, meaning, and my team and I talk all the time. If we've got a colleague who has a need where every Tuesday I need to, be working, I can't work that day, I need that day off because of the child situation that I'm balancing, and I've got this pod, but I've got to cover Tuesdays or whatever it might be, where I can't get childcare that day, or we flex. And we figure out a way to make it work. And it's not ideal, and it's not maybe long term that we can do that. But it's, if we can show you right now that we're willing to flex to whatever you need in the moment, we know that when you can give your 100% and work that Tuesday, you will, right? It's that trust factor, like you mentioned, with our team. And extending it, but it is more difficult to be flexible in the how you do it when you have a group that's in a bit more structured environment, like a retail setting.
Yeah, 100%. You've got me thinking about something I read this morning. I'm making my way through this exceptionally long book called Principles, written by Ray. It's a habit. 1 page a day. I'm doing it.
1 page a day. It'll take you 3 years, but 1 page a day.
It's fine. It's better than no pages.
Right.
I don't know. Anyway, it's called Principles. It's by Ray Dalio, who you probably know has founded the world's richest hedge fund. Fascinating, right? He wrote this. The pages I wrote this morning were really about like it is about as we think about ourselves as humans, it is about how are we evolving, and if it's survival of the fittest, and it's evolution and changing and adapting to change is like part of the human experience. And we are only as good as the group. Like taken individually, our contributions, and this is sort of morose, but it's like they're not that significant. right? Like, but in aggregate. And I was thinking about at the retail level, just thinking about like what attachment those frontline essential folks feel to, Lisa and to Huntington in a bigger way. And really having to take a look at their role and reimagine like how important it is for the people who come into the bank.
Oh, yeah.
May not have interacted with anyone else but their spouse, partner, or nobody, right? And I'm sure your frontline folks are like, I can only imagine how wonderful they are. And really, sort of having it be, metrics driven and honoring that, because we want Huntington to be around for a long time,
right.
And also, really leveling up. And it sounds like this is exactly what you're doing, like the importance, like even just like a frontline retail person at a bank being essential, like that's remarkable. And having them really tie into their goals in a personal way. To me, it's like you are like, to hear you're one of 500 people and 499 other people care about you. Like that's kind of a cool thing for some fuel, but I know it's difficult at that level. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're saying exactly how, we try to inspire each other to talk around here. And that is just purpose driven, right? It's not about the end result. You can't focus your asks, if you will, on the end result. It's not about, did you get this end result? It's about how many people did you impact today? Mm-hmm. It's about how many lives did you change? How many customers did you reach out to that wouldn't have had a phone call outside of your call today? And if you focus on the purpose and what it is that they're doing in the mission and the journey and how they're impacting people's lives, the results will come. And so doing that is harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
Because really thinking through, that impact that people have and how it connects to their individual purpose and their motivators takes some thinking. But I do think it's important that people can connect what it is that they do every day and why they're coming to a job every day to their bigger purpose. And if you don't help them to do that, that's the the difference maker in motivation.
Yeah, totally. Well, I could talk to you all day. Clearly. I wonder if you can leave us with, part of me wants to hear, this is so selfish, wants to hear like a story you've heard of an essential Huntington Bank employee connecting with a customer that had sort of a purpose. I know, right? So can you leave us with like some hope a little bit around that? Or if not,
absolutely. I can tell you that, I have, oh my gosh, I can't even pick just one, but I can tell you I've heard stories about colleagues making phone calls, just, their goal and as they hit the phones is not to sell you something. That's like this faux pas belief. It's just to connect with people and say, hey, we're your bank. We're still here. We're still open. We're still happy to help. And your finances keep going, whether you're leaving the house or staying in quarantine, the bills still get paid and the money, cycle still has to continue. So we're here and we're happy to help. And how is your life going? What's happening in your life? And we want them to take that approach with the customers that they interact with, not again, focused on any kind of product or that type of approach, but connecting with the person. And through those conversations, we've learned so many things. Number one, I can tell you there's a ridiculous amount of stories I've heard about customers that haven't left their house or that are sick or that, have had issues in this time and couldn't get to family members or couldn't get the help they need. And so many colleagues have kind of taken up fund and gone and brought groceries and dropped them on the doorsteps of some of that's their community and their customer base is their family. So they take care of them in that way. And then on the opposite end, I hear about customers connecting with businesses that are, as you know, going through really trying times and asking them, what can I do to help? Let's talk through it. And I want to support you. And they've gone through the PPP process and lending process, which was, life-changing for some of these small business owners, and through this time at least. And I just, I even heard stories about, colleagues that have gone out of their way to make sure that they helped get a wire transfer done, and make sure that goes through, so that PPE equipment was purchased for a local hospital. So, I mean, you pick the kind of impact. I could probably come up with a story about each one of them, because they are truly making a difference every day.
Thank you for that. It gives me, and I'm sure it'll give a lot of people, just hope for, we're grappling with the questions. We're grappling with motivation. We're grappling with so much as we evolve. I think that's what we're experiencing right now, is change and evolution, and like getting ready for the next thing that will confront us as businesses and individuals. But that fundamentally, like the one-to-one, I just can't underemphasize it. Can't. It's so important. So thank you for leading that way. And thank you for sharing part of your experience with us, and me. I mean, there's us, but there's also me.
Hey, and I'll take any more ideas. This is challenging times. And I think, we all have to sort of put our creative hats on and try to think of things differently, and it'll make us better in the long run.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I feel like we should host our own show.
Right. Emily and Lisa live.
That's right. I love it. All we need is we'll have a new backdrop, but for now it's celebrating the holidays.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Talk to you soon.